What's up, guys? Welcome to another video on our JavaScript course. Today we're going to talk about functions in JavaScript, what they are, how to use them, and why they're useful. Okay, so this is just a little image that I found that just shows the syntax for a function. So it starts with the function keyword. You write out the keyword function that lets your browser know you're about to make a function in your JavaScript. And then you name your function, so you can name it whatever you want. This function happens to be named sum. And then you put parentheses. And then within those parentheses, you can put things called parameters, which I'm not going to cover in this video. I'm going to have a separate video after this one, just focused on parameters, because that can get it gets a little tricky. So just ignore that for now. So just know that you need function, your function name, parentheses, and then curly braces. And then in between your curly braces, you put whatever block of code you want to run in your function, okay? And then you go ahead and call it, which is down here, all right? So that's just the basics of the syntax for a function. So let's go ahead and jump into our files, and we'll actually code up some functions together. And I'll give you a couple of challenges to do on your own, and then we'll do like a little mini project at the end just to show you how useful functions are in like a practical sense. So I'm in my JS course files, and I'm going to go here and create a new file, and I'm going to call this 6-functions.html, and I'll get my boilerplate code set up here. We'll name the document JS functions, okay, and then we'll just write all of our JavaScript and some script tags here. And we'll get started. Alright guys, so I have some pre-prepared notes here for functions that I'm just going to paste them in here, and then you can go ahead and copy them. I suggest you would, just so you can get functions down. So, and it just basically has, like what functions are. So it's just a multi-line JavaScript comment that I made. And it says all about functions. What is a function? And a function is a block of code designed to perform a specific task. Okay? Let me just spell that right. And functions are important in JavaScript and programming because they allow you to reuse code, use the same code as many times as you want, and use the same code with different arguments to get different results, which again, we're going to do arguments in a separate video after this one, okay? But yeah, so they're really important, guys, because it just prevents you from having to write the same code over and over again to run the same task that you want to do in whatever program or application you're making, okay? So they're really important to understand here. So I'll just make a comment, and I'll say writing a basic function. And the first function I'm going to make it'll just be a function where we say hello on the web page. So let's go ahead and do function. And we'll say, and we'll name it sayHello, and we'll do parentheses and curly braces, just like I showed you in that image. So again, we have the keyword function. I named it sayHello, and notice how I'm using camel case naming conventions where I capitalize the first letter of any other words that are in a multi-word function name, just like we do with variables. So sayHello is the name. I've got my empty parentheses, and then I've got my curly braces, and now all my function code is going to go in between here. So I'm going to say, I'll write an alert in here, and I'm just going to say hello. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this smaller, and we're going to launch the web page live, and then see our code get executed. So I'm going to hit go live here. And here we go. We're in JavaScript JS functions. There's our web page. So let me just get this adjusted here. And so we made our function that's supposed to say hello on the web page with an alert, but nothing's happening. And that's because we haven't called the function yet. So this is called calling a function. We'll make a comment here. Say calling a function. And to make your function work or to activate it, you have to basically just type the function name out with parentheses. So we'll say hello. Boom. We'll save the page, and then there we go. Now our function was called, and that's coming across here on our web page. Hello, and our alert. So that's how you call the function. This is how you write a basic function, okay? So let's do one more function together just as another example. So I'm just going to comment this out because I don't want this to keep popping up every single time that I reload the page or hit save. But I'm going to go below here and we'll write another function. And we'll call this one secretPassword. Okay? And we'll save. And then I'm going to have this function log the secret password to the console. So I'm going to say console.log. And we'll say the password is ... and we'll say JavaScript. Okay? So why is it a secret password? Well, because we're logging this to the console, only developers would know how to get to developer tools and view the console. So that pretty much makes it secret, right? Because if you're not a developer, you're never going to see this message. So let's go ahead and right click and hit inspect and go to our console. And again, nothing's here because we didn't call the function yet. So let's not forget that. So let's call our function, which is secretPassword, parentheses, and hit save. Here it is. The password is JavaScript. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have you do something on your own. Just pause the video, and then I'll come back and we'll do it together. It'll just be like a little quiz for basic function syntax. So I'm going to paste this code in here. It says create your own function called greeting that logs hello, my name is, and then type out your name to the console. Okay, so pretty similar to what we did here. So go ahead and pause the video and try this one on your own. All right, hopefully that wasn't too hard for you. If you had trouble with it, we're going to go over it together. So I'm going to say function and say greeting, parentheses, and then I'm going to say console.log hello. Oops, if I can type. Say hello. Let's put a comma here for punctuation. We'll say my name is, and my name is Nick. Okay. So we got our function written out here. Now we have to call it. So don't forget that step. So we'll say greeting, parentheses, and save. And there you go. So if you followed all these steps here, or if you just did it with me, you should be able to go to your console and have the message here, hello, my name is, and then whatever your name is. Okay? So the next thing that I want to go over with is returning values with functions, because right now our functions, we're writing some functions with our function syntax, but they're not very useful because we're not actually like returning values. We're not really storing any values in our functions, which is mainly what we do with them. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'll just make a comment here and I'll call this, I'll just say returning values. Okay. And I'm going to show you how we use the return keyword in a function. So let's pretend like we're making the racing game with JavaScript, and we have two players that are racing each other, and we want to get the total time that it took for both of them to complete a race. Okay. So I'm going to make a couple of variables here. I'm going to say let player 1 time, and that's one's going to be equal to 100, we'll say. And then right below it, I'm going to say let player 2 time, and we're going to equal that one to 150, or we'll say 140. Okay, so we have our player race times there, and now below this, we're going to create a function, and we're going to call this total race time. We're going to do our parentheses and our curly braces. And now we're going to use the return keyword. We're going to say, hey, we want this function to return player 1 time plus player 2 time. Okay, we want to return whatever the value of the sum is of that. We used the plus here, so that's the same as math. That's just like addition. Add them together, basically. All right, so instead of just calling my function, I'm actually going to store its value in a variable, which is like another actual practical common thing that you would do. So I'm going to say let race time, and I'm going to say that's going to be equal to our function, so total race time. Okay, so whatever the sum is here is remember, we use the return keyword, so we return that value, so that value is now equal to whatever or this function is equal to whatever this value is. So we can easily just put that in a variable. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to log that total to the console. So I'm going to say console.log, and we're just going to log out the variable of race time because it has this function saved in it, right? So this is why variables too are so valuable along with functions. This is how stuff works together. Maybe you can kind of see, I know we're learning theory in these first lessons, but something like this shows you how everything eventually is going to work together when we actually build stuff. So we did console.log race time, and then we have 100 plus 140, and that does equal 240, which is here in the console. Okay, so that did work just like we wanted it to. So now that's pretty much it for functions. I'll do one more little mini project for you to just show you maybe like another practical way of using functions before we go. So I'm going to write a function here that actually, we're going to write functions that render out, I'm going to have a button, and when I click it, it's going to render out the value of a function that I'm going to create, okay? So we're going to be doing a bunch of different things at once here, so follow along with me because I think this will really help you connect the dots on why functions are important, okay? So I'm going to so this is going to make a full-blown little mini application because we're actually going to use HTML, we're going to use an event listener and everything. So what I want to do here is I want to, like I said, I want to render out the value from a function actually on my web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to my HTML and I'm going to make a paragraph, and I'm going to give it an ID of some text. And I'm going to put some text in here. I'm going to say the sum is, and then colon, and I'm going to do a period and save, or a colon and a space, I'm sorry, and save. So we have the sum is, there it is, it's on our web page. And then below it, we're going to have a button. And I'm going to put type button, and we're going to give this button an ID of some button. Some BTN is what we'll call it. And then we're going to, and our button text is going to say get sum. Okay? So that'll help us get the sum when we click it. All right? So our HTML is set. So let's go down here and let's use some functions and event listeners to render what the sum is of the function that we create. So let's say we'll do a function similar to what we did up here. So I'm just going to put a comment here. So I'm just going to paste a comment in here and just describing what we're doing here. So we're going to use a function and click a button to render the return value of the total sum value when it is clicked. Okay, so render might sound like a fancy word, but render is just a way of saying put it on the screen. So we want to render it. Okay, so let's do this. We'll go, we'll just have two numbers again. We'll say let num1, and we'll equal that to 50. And we'll say let num2, and that's going to equal 50 as well. And then we're going to make a function called totalSum. Okay. And then we're just going to do that. We're going to return the value again. We're going to save that whatever the value is in our function. So we'll say num1 plus num2. All right, so now that's saved, okay? So this job of this function is to take whatever these two variables are and add them together. And then we're going to make it so that we can click this button and render this out right here, whatever this should be. So it should be 50 plus 50 is 100, right? So it should say the sum is 100 when we click this button, if we do it right. So I'm going to say let, and I'm going to create a variable called sumText, and that's going to be equal to document.getElementById. And then we're going to grab the ID that we created for here, sum-text. I'm going to copy and paste that in. Okay, so there we go. So and we can confirm that we grabbed onto that to our paragraph element here by just logging it. So let's just check our work. Console.log sumText, and it is giving me that element, so I'm on the right track. And then let's go. Let's grab a hold of this button now. So I'm going to say const and we'll call this sum button. And that's going to be the same code as here. So we'll say document dot get element by ID. And let's copy paste that ID in there. And I always copy paste my IDs when I'm doing JavaScript, guys, just to avoid any chance of a typo. And then let's make sure that we have the correct element here. So we'll say console.log sum button. And we do have the button showing here. So again, we're doing good. All right, so now we're going to say sum button dot addEventListener. We're going to listen for an event. We're going to listen for a click on the button, and then we're going to run a function called render sum. Okay, so we saved it, and I just threw this error here on the console because render sum isn't a function that I created yet, so we have to create it. So it's just saying like, hey man, render sum is not defined. It's undefined. What are you talking about? But now we're going to create it down here. So we'll say function render sum. Okay, and then we'll save, and that error is going to go away because now there is a render sum function that this is listening for, the click event. And then we're going to say, now we're going to access our sum text variable, which is the paragraph. And we're going to say sum text dot text content plus equals total sum. So what is total sum? Remember, it's just these two added together. So let's save. And now let's see. So now we have this hooked up with an event listener that's listening for a click. And whenever I click, we're running render sum instead of calling it like this by itself. We're running it whenever I click. So if I click, this should say the sum is 100 if we did everything correct. So let's see. Boom. The sum is 100. Now every time I click, it'll just keep spitting out 100s and running this block of code. So check this out. See that? We're running the function over and over and over again. This is reusable code whenever we want. Okay? So I mean, you wouldn't really practically want to do that, but that was just to illustrate like, hey, this is how everything kind of works together in the big picture when you're actually building stuff with event listeners and functions and all that stuff. So yeah, there we go, guys. So that's all for this video. Again, we just want to, all we want to be comfortable with after this is writing a function syntax, and then returning values when we have to, okay? So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. We're going to go more in depth. We're going to add on the second part of functions, which is arguments that you can put in here to do different stuff, okay?